Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's topic is related to velocity. Why velocity is calculated as an average value and how to calculate velocity. Velocity is a very important topic. The reason is with the help of this value velocity, we derive many other factors. This velocity impacts many other calculations as well. So it is very important with the topic velocity. So let's get into the topic called velocity. So what is velocity? Velocity is an average value that is calculated with the help of completed work in the sprint. This is calculated with the help of few completed sprints. Okay. So let's now try to identify what are the key words here. Yeah. Velocity is an average value that is calculated with the help of completed work in sprints. Average value is the first keyword and it is calculated with the help of completed work in the sprint. Completed work is the second keyword and this is calculated with the help of few completed sprints. Few completed sprints is the third keyword. Average velocity, that is the average value. Completed work in sprint, few completed sprints. So velocity is an average value calculated with the help of completed work in the sprint, and that is also with the help of few completed sprints. Now let's try to get into a very normal example in our day-to-day life so that it's easy for us to understand this velocity concept. When we say velocity is an average value, right? Okay, so actually when I started the habit of my daily walk every day morning, initially I used to walk for an hour, like 2 miles. Later it increased into a level of like for 1 hour I used to walk for 3 miles. Then it improved to 4 miles. It's like that. It was varying. It's not like every day 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles. Some days it used to be 2 miles, and some days it used to be 3 miles. Some days it used to be 5 miles. So something like that, right? But it's fluctuating. It's not every day the value will not be same. Now, when someone is asking me like, Selvi, for every I have seen you walking every day, like generally how much distance you cover in an hour, what will be my answer? Will I say that yesterday whatever I have covered, or I will say that what I have covered in the very first day, or someday I will pick randomly and say that this is what it is? What I will do, hey, like on an average I generally cover like 3 miles. Oh, okay. So why I'm using the word on an average here? Because even though me, Selvi, who is walking every day, same time frame like 1 hour. So these two things are kind of like constant, right? Selvi is constant and 1 hour is also constant. But what is differing here? How much distance Selvi is traveling or walking every day is changing. It is changing because of different reasons, right? Maybe I'm not so active some days, like I'm kind of sleepy, so I'm not so energetically walking. And some days maybe weather is not so good, or some days I'm not feeling that great with health, whatever may be the reasons. But on an average, I'm covering like 3 miles. Same thing is with velocity calculation also. So when we say average value, every sprint team is going to be constant. Generally, we will not see much changes in the team, right? The reason is every member will not be keep joining, relieving from the team every sprint. It is going to be like more or less like constant team, and constant time period, which means your sprint period is going to be like 1 week means it's 1 week, 2 weeks means it's 2 weeks. You will not be changing for every sprint. Okay, last sprint was like 1 week, next sprint was like 2 weeks. You will not be calculating like that. So these two things are kind of constant, but every sprint, is the team is going to achieve the same story points? No. Why? Reason can be many. Something like uh, there are some scope changes happen during the sprint execution. There can be some blockers which you have not even thought of. There can be some dependencies. These all are some of the common things that can occur, right? Which affect your sprint execution. So at the end, what will happen? Your achieved story points at the end of the sprint definitely will not be the same for every sprint. And sometimes unexpected sick leave from team members also will impact your achieved story points. So whatever may be the reason, with every sprint, the achieved story point is not going to be a constant value. It is going to be fluctuating. Same way, like how one day I walk for like 3 miles, second day 1 mile, third day 2 miles, like that. Same way it is also going to happen. But if it is keep on fluctuating, how to predict your team? Why to predict? That is another question, right? Okay, consider you are in the management position or you are in the product management team and you want to really understand in what velocity your team is running so that you can predict certain things. For example, I have this much of work, and if team is running with this speed, what can be the target date that we can look for to complete all this work? You can think of in that way. So to know that, to predict that, you need to know what is the velocity that your team is executing, right? You should know that factor to predict your team's completion percentage, or you want to predict how the work is going to be completed. For that, you need to have this velocity. So when someone is asking what is the velocity of your team, what we will say? Can you pick the achieved story points from your recent sprint execution that got closed yesterday? Or you will pick from the very first because that was the new team, you will do that? Or you will randomly pick some sprint and say that this is your velocity? How you will be calculating? You will be calculating an average value here. That is the reason velocity is always calculated as an average value. The reason is always the achieved story points will be fluctuating. Even though the team is same, the time period is same, but the overall achievement at the end of the sprint will be fluctuating sprint by sprint. That is the reason whenever we calculate the velocity, we take that as an average value. Okay, now average value has been taken. With that, we are also predicting. We will see how prediction happens with the help of velocity as a separate episode. But for prediction, this velocity is going to help. Fine. And we are also taking this value from the completed sprints. Fine. There was one another keyword that we found, that is few completed sprints. Okay. Why few completed sprints? How to select that few keyword here? What does that few mean? 1, 2, 3. What is that? Now let's try to understand a little bit more. How to calculate the velocity? We now know that velocity is an average value, and we calculate it with the help of the completed sprints. That's all we know. Now how to calculate it and how to resolve this few keyword related secret as well. Yeah. So now my team has completed 5 sprints. For you can use a pen and paper just to make a note of this value so that it will be easy for you to understand if required. Otherwise, just you can follow me as well. Sprint 1 team has executed, which means team has completed and achieved 30 story points. In second sprint, team has achieved 20 story points. In third sprint, team has achieved 20 story points. So 20 plus 20 plus 30. Okay. Now, fourth sprint, team has completed 30 story points. Okay. So 30 plus 30 plus 20 plus 20. I'm just combining it so for your recollecting the values. So 60 plus 40, 100. Okay, 4 sprints completed. 100 divided by 4, that is 25. So I'm just trying to explain it one more time, this example. 4 sprints we have completed. We are in the 5th sprint. Okay, let's take like that as an example. First sprint we have achieved 30, second sprint 20, third sprint 20, and fourth sprint 30. So 30 plus 20 plus 20 plus 30, that is 100. And how many sprints? 4 sprints. So divided by 4. How much is the average value? That is 25. This is called as average velocity. So average velocity is calculated with the help of completed sprints divided by the number of sprints. The achieved story points by the sprints divided by the number of sprints. That is nothing but sum of achieved story points. Now, average velocity when we are starting sprint 5 is 25. We have taken last 4 sprints. Right? In this example, sprint 1, 2, 3, 4 we have taken. Then when it comes to sprint 6, what I should do? I should do sprint 2, 3, 4, 5. You should calculate average velocity from sprint 2, sprint 3, sprint 4, sprint 5. Take the sum of achieved story points from 2, 3, 4 and 5 sprints divided by 4, which is number of sprints is 4. So I am always keeping 4 sprints as that few completed sprints is the keyword, right? That few here is 4. Is it always required to be 4? No, not at all. I gave this example with 4. What else we can do? You can even go with 3 sprints, or you can even go with 5 sprints. How to decide whether I can go with 3 sprints or go with 5 sprints? What is the few completed sprints? How to derive that value? Here I have taken 4. How I have taken 4? Why can't I go with 3? Why can't I go with 5? Let's understand that. Your team has just started the sprint executions, which means your team is new and they have just started and they have just executed only few sprints. Okay, and they are still settling down, and you are always seeing a huge fluctuation in your achieved story points because there are many team members joining the team. They are settling, the product backlog is getting refined, getting better. So there are many ups and downs, and team is not so familiar with the estimation technique, so they are ramping up on that. So all these factors are going on. So it's completely not settled. But of course, yeah, we can take this and consider it for the velocity calculation. But there is a lot of fluctuation that you are able to see. In those kind of cases, always to go for slightly bigger number, which means you can take 5 or 6 sprints as your average velocity calculation. The reason is, as there is lot of fluctuation, if you take very less number of sprints, that is only 2 or 3, those 2 sprints would have been a cakewalk for the team. So they would have executed much well. But the third sprint, it would have changed a lot. So in cases where you are seeing lot of fluctuation and your team is just settled and they are still trying to get into the pace, please go with a good number, that is 5 or 6 for average velocity calculation. When you yourself can see that always it is more or less the achieved story point is same and team is kind of settled and you know that very well, okay, they are going with good pace, then you can reduce the number of sprints to 3 for average velocity calculation. So it is completely dependent on the way the execution is happening in the team, with the help of different parameters like whether the team is completely in the pace of execution, and whether they are executing in the level of with a settled team, and whether the backlog is completely available. With all those factors, you will be able to see what is the level of fluctuation happening. Accordingly, you should select the number of sprints for the average velocity calculation. Okay. So today we have seen, in a nutshell, I'll just try to cover all the things. What is velocity we have seen, and how to calculate the velocity. That is always an average value. Remember, you should be summing up all the achieved story points from few set of sprints, and that value divided by the number of sprints. That gives your average velocity. So the average velocity can be calculated from last 3 sprints or last 5 sprints, whatever can be. But when to select 3, when to select 5, we need to be really careful. And the next one is, average velocity will be always changing for every sprint. It cannot be a constant value throughout, because every time when a sprint is getting completed, you will be calculating a fresh average velocity including the recent completed sprint, which means when you are in sprint 5 initiation, that means till sprint 4 achieved story points will be included for the average velocity calculation. When you are moving to sprint 6, automatically sprint 5 got closed, so you should be including that for your average velocity calculation. So every sprint average velocity will also be keep changing. We will see in very detail what are the benefits of this velocity, and where all the places we can use this velocity, and what is the impact that this velocity give to us. We will be seeing in our further episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Happy learning and stay tuned.